the food deserts. Then we also have Mark Bomford, and I'm not skipping Jerry intentionally, but just the order that I'm thinking that we're speaking in. So Mark took over the Yale Sustainable Food Project in October, and he'd been working in sustainable food systems for about 15 years. He has been a farmer, a manager, and a leader, and he did some really visionary things up at the University of British Columbia, where he was beforehand. He basically took what was effectively a vacant lot that was destined for development and turned it into a viable study site to be integrated into sustainability studies. He also founded the Center for Sustainable Food Systems at the University of British Columbia. And then that research site was turned into what's called a green academic zone on campus, which I kind of want us to have this conversation about later, because I think it's a really, really cool idea. And then we have Jerry. Jerry Reamer, this is a tongue twister. Jerry Reamer joined Yale Dining in 2008 as the Director of Supply Chain and Sustainability. And so what's fabulous to us is that the supply chain for dining is extremely complicated and requires somebody to be really focused and dedicated. And Jerry's proven to be a real ally to us in helping to sort of enhance the portfolio of what's going on there and to make it more visible, because a lot is going on behind the scenes over there. She's been with the university for about 20 years now. She's a certified purchasing manager and certified professional in supply management. And so I'm going to stop here and let these folks jump in. We're going to start with Kelly, and then we'll do some Q&A when we're done.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I think the mic's not working, so I'll just talk loudly, which is fine. You can hear it? Okay. When I became master of Silliman College in 2004, one of the first people to introduce himself to me was C.J. May. And I remember those days where not many people were paying attention to something as elementary as recycling, much less sustainability as a concept. And CJ had this dogged determination, a polite dogged determination, to get people to care about this. And CJ, I admire you for what you've accomplished. You can only imagine the pride you must feel at so many things that have happened around the campus. Certainly there's work to do, but congratulations for all you've accomplished. And you certainly helped inspire me along this direction, which was really nice. I direct a place at Yale called the Rudd Center for Food Policy and Obesity, and we care mainly about overabundance of food and what it's doing to the world's health. Certainly in America, everybody knows the prevalence of obesity is really very high, the attendant costs for diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and the like. But what a lot of people don't recognize is how the rates are increasing around the world. There's not a single country in the world not touched by rising obesity rates. And the health minister of China recently declared that overnutrition is now a more significant problem in his country than undernutrition is. And who would have ever imagined that day? Those of us who grew up with mothers telling us to clean your plate because there's starving children in China could never imagine such a day would come, but it has. And so in the introduction it was mentioned that my observation is we have these three parts of the triangle where you have major world food problems. You've got about a billion people in the world are undernourished or suffer from food insecurity, another billion people that are overnourished and are suffering from obesity-related diseases, and then the third part of the triangle, of course, is climate change, sustainability, and the like. And it's absolutely correct that those groups don't talk to each other, and it's nice that some of that discussion is occurring at least on the Yale campus, because you have conferences, NGOs, books, films, you have everything that tends to focus on one part of that triangle, but not all of them. And when you bring the picture together, you have something really pretty amazing occurring. A lot of people interested in food for various reasons, but not for all the same outcomes in mind. But there are some similar things, like access to locally grown food, for example, that would help in each part of the triangle. And if these groups could coalesce around a common set of messages, all of a sudden you have a lot more players on the team and probably have a much greater impact on public policy. I also teach a course on campus that is called the Psychology, Biology, and Politics of Food that has a lot of freshmen and sophomores in it, and I've taught it maybe 4 times now every other year. And each year, and there's a large part of that class, probably if there's one theme in the class, it's about sustainability and the impact of food choices on the environment. And the number of students in the class has just risen and risen over time, so it shows the increasing interest in the Yale undergraduate population. And one of the things that I have students do at the end of the class is I just tell them do a project. And that's about as much guidance as I give them. And what I love to see is the ingenuity that students come up with when they do this project. Some will invent a board game for teaching children nutrition. Others will do a documentary film. Others will do a research project and collect data among their fellow Yale undergrads. And a number of them will do very creative things, like the art students will do a painting that has food in the real food in the painting. Others, in fact, one student did a videotape. They went to Trader Joe's, did dumpster diving, found out how much of I didn't know that was CJ's game. But they did this, and I was afraid they were going to get arrested for doing this, but they did it nonetheless. And so the students have this enormous creativity and ingenuity, and a lot of them care very deeply about food, and that number seems to be rising exponentially, which is really nice. Thank goodness for all the wonderful things that are going on campus. So let me talk for a few minutes about the topic of food access. You've all heard the term food deserts, areas where people have little access to healthy food. Those tend to be in rural areas or in poor urban areas, but they're not confined to those places. And in those places, people tend to rely on what's available and what's near them, sometimes because they don't have transportation to get, they have other choices. And what they tend to, and a lot of this is happening in the New Haven area too, where people are reliant on corner markets, bodegas in major areas like New York City and the like. And as a consequence, the food choices that they have tend to be highly processed foods, certainly foods that aren't made with sustainability in mind, but foods that are high in sugar, fat, and salt and tend to deteriorate their health. What can be done about this? Certainly food access is an important issue, and so there are a lot of initiatives around the country focusing on food access. Farmers markets in inner cities would be an example of that, farm-to-school programs, incentives for food stamp recipients, for example, to have their money multiply if they use it to buy fruits and vegetables. Things like that are occurring now, where public policy is starting to line up with the nutrition needs of the country, and those are all very good to see. Some of this I've seen in my own daughter. Christy is her name. She graduated from college last year and belongs to the Food Corps. And some of you may know the Food Corps as a branch of AmeriCorps. It's in its first year now, a wonderful program, started by a group of people, including two Yale alums who made the movie Chain Corps. Kurt Ellis and Ian Cheney were part of the group that initiated the Food Corps. And now students right out of college can go volunteer and spend a year or two working in some setting that is supposed to correct the food inequities that exist in our country. So my daughter is working in a middle school in a poor area of Little Rock, Arkansas, where she's running the school garden and teaching biology classes in order to get kids interested in food and sustainability issues. And she has a group of students who work with her on the school garden that are called the Green Team, and it's just a remarkable thing. And thank goodness such a volunteer effort exists around food as a part of social service. I think that's a very good sign of the time. So it's wonderful that these food access issues are being corrected. Now, for the people who care about obesity as a public health problem, as we do, because of the massive healthcare costs, the human suffering that occurs as a result of this, there's an interesting question that we face about whether decreasing obesity is a matter of getting good food out there into the system or removing bad food from it. And there's this non-articulated assumption that many people have that if you push good food into a system, that the bad food will exit that system somehow. People will be in a calorie deficit, they'll lose weight, and everybody will be happy. But the world doesn't seem to work that way. And what seems to happen is that access to unhealthy food tends to be a stronger predictor of poor diet than lack of access to healthy food. And so two things really seem to be done in concert, which is to increase access to healthy food, but also to get rid of the junk. And so there's just no reason soda should be in schools. There's no reason that the government, through things like the food stamp program, should buy things like sugar-sweetened beverages. There are all sorts of these interesting policy issues that come up in this context. But one thing we might be doing by pushing good foods into the system is pushing more calories into the system that ultimately could have a negative impact with obesity as the outcome. There are lots of reasons to push good food into systems: heart disease, cancer, equity, social justice reasons, environmental issues. There are a billion reasons to do it. But in terms of obesity, if possible,